Learning theory. Hull learning theory. Hull theories were first presented in Mathematico-deductive theory of rote learning 1940 and principles of behavior 1943, which established his analysis of animal learning and conditioning as the dominant learning theory of its time. Hull had set his theory of learning in terms of 17 postulates and 15 corollaries. They may be briefly discussed as first. The postulate first deals with the external stimulation which triggers a sensory impulse that continues for a few seconds after the stimulating event has terminated. This impulse is the stimulus trace. To the second postulate includes trace interaction, as each organism is bombarded by many stimuli and thus many sensory traces are generated. These traces interact with one another and represent complexity of stimulation. 3. Third postulate deals with the role of reinforcement in learning. Unlearned behaviors are triggered first when the need arises. If these behaviors fail, organism learns new behaviors to reduce the need. Fourth postulate dealt with habit formation of what Hull called as habit strength. As the association between stimulus and the response strengthens, Hull says that the habit of giving that response to that stimulus increases. This habit strength is represented as SHR is equal to 1 minus 10 bracket minus 0.0305 n, or SHR is equal to 1 minus 1 by 100.0305 n, where n is the number of successive reinforcements strengthening stimulus and response. Fifth postulate dealt with primary drive T. Primary drive is also a kind of intervening variable which was very important in Hull's theory. Drive is a temporary state of the organism that is produced by something our body needs or by painful stimulation. Sixth and seventh postulate were also important in explanation of learning. The sixth postulate is concerned with stimulus intensity V and the seventh is concerned with incentive motivation K. The stimulus intensity V refers to the fact that the probability of a response to occur increases as the intensity of the stimulus increases. Incentive motivation K is a pull factor and refers to the motivating effect of the incentive provided for making a response. It is measured in terms of both quality and quantity. Eighth postulate dealt with reaction potential SER. The probability of a learned response occurring at a particular moment is called reaction potential SCR and is the product of habit strength and drive. If habit strength or drive equals 0, reaction potential equals 0. SER is equal to SHR into D. The ninth postulate dealt with inhibition I or inhibitory potential. Hull divided inhibition into two parts. Reactive inhibition refers to a tendency of not repeating a response that has just been made. Therefore, it is a kind of negative drive. And second is conditional inhibition, which is a kind of habit of no responding produced by reactive inhibition. Other postulates deal with those phenomena which are related to the learning phenomenon. For example, 10th postulate was concerned with stimulus generalization, 11th with stimulus interaction, 12th with behavioral oscillation, 13 with reception potential related to threshold, 14 with reaction potential related to reaction latency, 15 with reaction potential related to reaction amplitude, and 16th with reaction potential related to low total response to extension. Postulate 17th dealt with the problem of individual differences. In the nutshell, it can be said that the whole system of learning comprises a series of postulates and corollaries that mainly centered on drive, reinforcement, and response strength. E. Tolman, Edward Chase Tolman learning theory. Tolman was an influential early learning theorist who introduced a number of new concepts and vocabulary to the field of learning psychology. Tolman considered behavior in terms of means and relationship. In other words, behavior for him is goal directed, that is purposive. Due to this reason, he has named his system as an objective behavioristic purposivism. According to Tolman's theory of sign learning, an organism learns by pursuing signs to a goal, that is, learning is acquired through meaningful behavior. Tolman emphasized the organized aspect of learning. The stimuli which are allowed in are not connected by just simple one to one switches to the outgoing responses. Rather, the incoming impulses are usually worked over and elaborated in the central control room into a tentative cognitive like map of the environment, and it is this tentative map indicating routes and paths and environmental relationships which finally determines what responses, if any, the animal will finally make. Tolman 1948. Tolman 1932 proposed five types of learning. First, approach learning; two, escape learning; three, avoidance learning; four, choice point learning; 5. Latent learning. All forms of learning depends upon means and readiness, that is goal oriented behavior mediated by expectations, perceptions, representations, and other internal or environmental variables. Tolman's version of behaviorism emphasized the relationship between stimuli rather than stimulus response. According to Tolman, a new stimulus, the sign becomes associated with already meaningful stimulus, the significate through a series of pairings, which there was no need for reinforcement in order to establish learning. Scope application. Although Tolman intended his theory to apply to human learning, almost all of his research was done with rats and mazes. Tolman 1942 examines motivation towards war, but this work is not directly related to his learning theory. Principles. First, learning is always purposive and goal directed. Two, learning often involves the use of environmental factors to achieve a goal, for example, means and analysis. Three, organisms will select the shortest or easiest path to achieve a goal. Burrhus Frederick Skinner, B.F. Skinner Learning Theory. The theory of B.F. Skinner is based upon the idea the best way to understand behavior is to look at the cause of an action and its consequences. He called this approach operant conditioning, which was based on the work of Thorndike 1905. Reinforcement is the key element in Skinner's SR theory. Behavior which is reinforced tends to be repeated, strengthens, and the behavior which is not reinforced tend to be extinguished, weakened. A reinforcer is anything that strengthens the desired response. It could be verbal praise, a good grade, or a feeling of increased accomplishment or satisfaction. Positive reinforcement strengthen a behavior by providing a consequence an individual finds rewarding. For example, if your teacher gives you a chocolate reward you like the most every time you complete your assignment or project, you are most likely to repeat this behavior in the future, thus strengthening the behavior of completing your assignment or project. Negative reinforcement, on the other hand, also tends to strengthen behavior as it stops or removes an unpleasant experience. For example, if you do not complete your assignment or project on time, every time your teacher punishes you by ordering you to take 10 rounds of the school playground, which is really big and it's hard for you to run in the scorching heat of the summer. So, to avoid those 10 rounds of the playground, you always complete your project on time, thus strengthening the behavior of completing your project on time. In operant conditioning, the other phenomena like secondary reinforcement, extension, discrimination, differentiation, and aversive conditioning have also been examined. One of the distinctive aspects of Skinner's theory is that it attempted to provide behavioral explanations for a broad range of cognitive phenomena. For example, Skinner explained drive, motivation, In terms of deprivation and reinforcement schedules, Skinner 1975 tried to account for verbal learning and language within the operant conditioning paradigm, although this effort was strongly rejected by linguistic and psycholinguists. Skinner 1971 deals with the issue of free will and social control. Scope application operant conditioning has been widely applied in clinical settings, widely applied in clinical, that is behavior modification, as well as teaching, that is classroom management and instructional development. For example, programmed instruction. Cognitive approaches in learning, latent and observational learning, placed learning, and latent learning. A psychologist operating from the cognitive perspective during the middle 20th century was Edward Tolman. Tolman 1930 focused his studies on how rats learn to navigate through mazes. Tolman believed that learning occurred in animals as well as humans through mental activities such as insight and the formation of mental representations of the environment he referred to as cognitive maps. Tolman thus believed that animals learn more about place rather than how to engage in habits. Cognitive maps or mental representations of the spatial layout of the environment from the critical element in Tolman's theory of place learning. Taking the cognitive concept of place learning into consideration, Tolman wanted to show that animals could learn to navigate their environment without receiving any reinforcement. Tolman used a complex maze and three groups of rats in what he referred to as latent learning research. The first group, after running, was given no reward at all in the goal box. The second group was given food in the goal box after completion of each run. The third group ran the maze without food or reward for the first 10 days. From 11th day and onwards, they were given food in the goal box after each run. The results supported Tolman's theory. Rats who never received rewards for completing the maze improved only slightly. Improvement was measured in number of errors over the course of 11 days. The rats that were consistently rewarded improved quickly until they reached a maximum efficiency towards the end of the study. The results of the third group of rats, those that had been rewarded only on the 11th day, were the most striking after the initial reward trial. These rats were just as efficient at completing the maze as those rats had been rewarded the entire time. Tolman explained these results as latent learning. The rats had learned to navigate their environment all along, but this learning did not emerge until it was reinforced. It took only one reinforcement for the rats to reach maximum efficiency. The learning was latent or hidden from view until reinforcement brought it out. It did not take reinforcement to learn the behavior. The behavior was simply observed and strengthened with reinforcement. Observational learning. In social learning theory, Albert Bandura 1977 states that behavior is learned from the environment through the process of observational learning. An illusion of Bandura's concept of observational learning is one of his studies he conducted using kindergarten age children. All the children and one study watched a film portraying an adult engaged in aggressive behavior. The adult serves as a simple model for such behavior in that this adult was in a room full of toys and was seen verbally insulting, hitting, kicking, throwing, and hammering a large plastic inflatable Bobo doll. For one group of children, the model was reinforced for the assaults with candy and soda. For the second group, the model was punished verbally and received a spanking. The third group of children viewed the aggressive model where no consequences were given. The results demonstrated that humans could learn by simply witnessing the consequences of others. When left in the room alone with a similar Bobo doll, those children in the first group where the model was rewarded for aggression displayed much aggressive behavior by imitating what the model had done, as well as showing novel aggressive actions. Those in the group witnessing the model being punished for aggressive behavior were much more gentle with doll and display few, if any, aggressive acts towards it. Children in the group who witnessed the model receiving no consequences for the aggression were more ambiguous in their behavior, showing more aggressive some genetic behaviors and some gentle behaviors. Bandura emphasized the role of observation, attention, imitation, and expectations in the process. Experimental analysis of behavior, behavior modification, shaping. Behavior modification, it is derived from psychological treatment approaches based on the tenets of operant conditioning proposed by B.F. Skinner. The theories of operant conditioning state that behavior can be shaped by reinforcement or lack of it. As a treatment technique, behavior modification is used to address many problems in both adults and children. Behavior modification has been successfully used to treat attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, phobias, enuresis, bedwetting, separation anxiety disorder, and others. Stages of behavior modification. Behavior modification is based on two types of theories. One involves antecedents, that is, events which occur before a particular behavior is demonstrated, and the other is observable behavior, that is, those events that occur after a particular behavior has been occurred. A behavior modification technique is applicable only after a series of changes. An appropriate behavior is observed, identified, targeted, and stopped. Meanwhile, a new appropriate behavior must be identified, developed, strengthened, and maintained. Reinforcements and punishments. Positive reinforcement is the ways in which you encourage the desired behavior. It increases the future frequency of the desired behavior. Patting the back, passing a smile, or sometimes even giving a chocolate reward, etc., when a person behaves properly is called positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement, on the other hand, increases the likelihood that a particular negative behavior would not happen in the future. It is often confused with punishment. While punishment is negative, negative reinforcement is positive. It is a positive way of reducing a particular behavior. Behavior modification techniques. First, classroom monitoring, effective teaching practices, frequent monitoring, strict rules and regulations, social appraisal, etc. Through pro-social behavior, positive and negative reinforcements, modeling of pro-social behavior, verbal instruction, role-playing, etc. 3. Moral education, moral science classes on real-life situations, imaginary situations and literature. Let students play different roles as a teacher, principal, parents, etc. and participate in school administration. 4. Social problem solving, direct teaching of social problem solving, SPS skills, example, alternative thinking, means and thinking, dialoguing, self instruction training, etc. 5. Effective communication models, values explanation, activities, active listening, importance of communication and interpersonal skills, training for students and teachers. Shaping, the differential reinforcement of successive approximations, or more commonly shaping, is a conditioned procedure used primarily in the experimental analysis of behavior. It was introduced by B.F. Skinner with pigeons and extended to dogs, dolphins, humans, and other species. In shaping, the form of an existing response is gradually changed across successive trials towards a desired target behavior using differential reinforcement. The principles of shaping are present in everyday interactions with the environment. Successive approximations. The successive approximations reinforced are increasingly accurate approximations of a response desired by a trainer. As training progresses, the trainer stops reinforcing the less accurate approximations. For example, in training a rat to press a lever, the following successive approximations might be reinforced. Start, the trainer may reward the rat when it makes any movement at all in the direction of the lever. Then the rat has to actually take a step toward the lever to get rewarded. Then it has to go over to the lever to get rewarded, and so on until only pressing the lever will produce reward. The trainer would start by reinforcing all behaviors in the first category, then restrict enforcement to responses in the second category, and then progressively restrict reinforcement to each successive, more accurate approximation. As training progresses, the response reinforced becomes progressively more like the desired behavior. The culmination of the process is that the strength of the response measured here as the frequency of lever pressing increases. In the beginning, there is little probability that the rat would depress the lever, the only possibility being that it would depress the lever by accident. Through training, the rat can be brought to depress the lever frequently. Practical applications. Shaping is used in two areas in psychology: training operant responses in lab animals, and in applied behavior analysis or behavior modification to change human or animal behaviors considered to be maladaptive or dysfunctional. It also plays an important role in commercial animal training. Shaping assists in discrimination and in generalization as well. Discrimination learning. In psychology, discrimination learning is the process by which animals or people learn to make direct responses to different stimuli. In more general terms, discrimination is the process of learning to make one response to one stimulus and a different response or no response to another stimulus. The term discrimination learning, learning to respond differentially to different stimuli, encompasses a diverse range of different types of learning such as perceptual learning, concept learning, and language learning. Learning to discriminate often involves a process of differentiation and unitization. Differentiation involves learning to separate similar stimuli into different categories, for example, ravens versus crows. Unitization involves learning to group stimuli into larger units and to discriminate based on the unit. For example, seeing a whole face instead of separate facial features. In classical conditioning, discrimination occurs when one stimulus triggers a conditional response but another does not. To set up discrimination in the laboratory, a researcher creates a situation in which the two stimuli predict different things. For example, a green light is followed by food, but a red light follows nothing. After a number of repeated trials, the dog learns to discriminate between green and red lights. It salivates to the green light, but not to the red light. Thank you.